This video isn't about being negative or putting any one group of individuals down. I fall for the very same entrapment as everyone else does, but I sort of pose this soapbox as sort of like a genuine question. I visited the Hopkinton State Fair today with the intention of making my typical informative style video, but I was much more intrigued and distracted by the sample size of population that I was presented with. I mean this in the most respectful, and I come at this with almost a scientific perspective of dialogue and concern, if you will. But this nation has a really, really bad health epidemic. And I would say with confidence that 90% of the people that I saw at the fair were moderate to very poor health, mainly obesity. And it was evident that so many people were struggling to walk the fairgrounds or just sitting, looking tired while eating fair food. And I think this is talked about a lot, but there's very little incentive or initiative to take any dramatic action, mainly because of this social barrier to make people, in concern of making people feel bad about their food and lifestyle addiction. But the denial rate of what you eat and how active you are has anything to do with your pursuit of happiness is far too high. I think most everyone would admit that they could eat better or exercise more, but the conversation usually stops there. And it's easy to get people to take blood pressure medication, but it's very difficult to get someone to skip out on fries for one meal. And I don't have a realistic solution to this problem because it exists on a scale that is much larger than I can imagine. And it really becomes more of like an interesting thought experiment for me. How far does this go before a dramatic wave of lifestyle change takes place? I imagine that, like myself, there is a little part of our brains that longs for a day when this problem is solved by science, but in danger of sounding edgy, I don't think that there's any evidence that that day will come. Not only does that require unimaginable breakthroughs in medical science, but it would single-handedly take out two of our biggest industries, medical and food. And those two things are viewed as very high importance to our population, but those two things are escorting us into a life of sickness, unhappiness, and this reliance on short-term satisfaction. And I spoke in a recent video about the difference in support one might receive between the pursuit of financial status and the pursuit of internal change. And I think there is like a shred of within that of understanding the problem. We are borderline discouraged to make real hard changes within ourselves. Doctors will recommend lots of solutions to ease side effects, but they'll tend to avoid telling you to simply stop being fat because that's a much tougher pill to swallow, pun intended. I once heard a great example that it's totally okay to tell your loved ones to quit smoking, but it's much less acceptable to tell your overweight loved one that they need to work on their weight. Just like a drug addict, they have the ability to acknowledge the problem, but tend to find these emotional excuses for avoiding the logic. And I've struggled with weight my whole life and have become hyper aware of recognizing the frustrations that other people have because I felt them myself. And I understand it and feel it, the annoyance regarding the situation, because it's one thing: hard. There is absolutely no way around it. There is no cheat, no hack, no pill, no secret method, nothing. Nothing to make it easier. It's simply and poetically hard. And I don't even think it's worth pointing fingers or getting angry at industries or propaganda, mostly because doing that is like asking someone to make it easier for you, which isn't gonna help anybody. And just like a violent child who learned his behavior from violent parents, getting angry with the parenting isn't gonna help the child, and certainly not gonna help with the child's future generations. We're all innocent, but yet we're all still responsible. And despite having made changes in my life, I still don't even feel close to being qualified to giving any sort of meaningful advice on this subject, because fighting that lifestyle addiction is still as hard for me as it was when I began. The only thing I can anecdotally speak on is the vast improvement that I've seen in my internal happiness, which in my opinion makes kind of this endless tunnel worth traveling through. But if I may humbly offer for just a second, a piece of encouragement, I guess. It's to take the very annoying and cringy and often unsensitive route of educating yourself on what exactly is in your food. And I'm not talking about is it organic or how many chemicals there are on the label, but just being mindful that everything you see on the nutrition facts label is far from natural to the origins of our digestion. Do nothing else. Don't try to cut carbs or sugar or embark on, some difficult diet. Don't even worry about like the obvious stuff like cake and ice cream. It's the little things like the handful of popcorn or the duck sauce with your Chinese food. And let me reiterate, I'm not presenting a solution. I'm not setting myself up as some sort of an example. I'm not disregarding the vast complexity of this issue. I would just like to personally take one tiny personal step towards this becoming a welcomed conversation in our everyday vernacular, just because that would help me. And this may come off as pessimistic, but the fair was sort of, in my opinion, this like exhibition of unhappiness, both in the animals we eat and the people who eat them. And despite not having a solution, I'm very confident that continuing down this path is going to greatly dwarf many of our seemingly most dire issues. In fact, I believe working to solve this will kill many birds with one stone. So I absolutely want to hear your thoughts on why I'm wrong or right, because the whole point of me saying any of this is based on a personal belief that talking about this has a much larger impact on every single American's overall happiness than many of the much louder topics that are in our societal discourse. So that being said, think about it while I go crush a pint of Ben & Jerry's.